Hey everybody, Tony here. Hope you're doing well. Hope your weekend is going well. It's Saturday, January 26th, and it's the battle of the Bitcoin ETFs, guys. We've all been anticipating, the VanEck Bitcoin ETF to be approved or at least being looked at by the SEC, with the upcoming deadline of February 27th. However, we just heard this week that the VanEck CBOE folks have withdrawn their application, citing the U.S. government shutdown, which would have most likely resulted in a disapproval or rejection because the SEC is running on a skeleton crew right now. Now, yesterday we did have news that the government has been reopened for at least the next 3 weeks until February 15th. But I think it was a smart idea by the folks of the CBOE to withdraw. This way, once the SEC is back in full force and everybody's working, they can resubmit again. And we heard this directly from the folks at VanEck. However, as yesterday, I shared some news about the NYSE Arca file paperwork for the Bitwise Bitcoin ETF approval. So we have a new player in the game that we didn't know about. And, obviously the Bitcoin ETF, it's really for the big money, but it's also going to be one of those, I think, psychological wins or, where the sentiment will change to bullish, I think, if a Bitcoin ETF were to get approved. Now, a Bitcoin ETF may never get approved. I'm just putting it out there, or it may not be approved for the next 2 years. Who knows, right? But it's still worth talking about because these are well-established institutions who are submitting their proposal, who have gotten approval for other ETFs, right? And what was unique about the NYSE Arca Bitwise Bitcoin ETF is that they are addressing all the major concerns of the SEC, which is market manipulation, where Bitcoin, crypto in general, is global, and the price can be manipulated by China, by South Korea, and so forth. So there has to be some sort of stability. And of course, it's a bit of the wild, wild west. The market isn't fully regulated yet, but these folks are still trying. So let me review here some of the details. So new details have surfaced about the Bitcoin Exchange Traded Fund ETF proposed by Bitwise and NYSE Arca. Bitwise Asset Management announced its intention to launch the ETF earlier this month. If approved, it would be the first Bitcoin ETF to make it to the U.S. market. At the time, the company said the NYSE Arca would file the 19B-4 rule change proposal in the near future. NYSE Arca indeed filed a form the same day, but it does not appear to be listed on the SEC website, possibly due to the ongoing U.S. government shutdown. As mentioned, they have a skeleton crew because it wasn't fully funded. However, as of yesterday, the president made the announcement of an agreement with Congress to get the government reopened temporarily. As a result, the document went largely unnoticed despite being posted on NYSE Arca's own website. Looks like CoinDesk tried to approach the SEC for details, but it got no response. When Bitwise first announced the ETF proposal, the company said it differed from the previous such efforts because a regulated third-party custodian would store the Bitcoins. So I'm curious to know who this regulated third-party custodian is. Could it be Bakkt? Could it be maybe ErisX? Or could it be, I think is that company BitGo? I think it might be BitGo, if I'm not mistaken, who are also a custodian service. So the company also said it would draw pricing data from a large number of exchanges, including both spot and physically settled futures markets to calculate the index determining the asset's value. The file proposal, let me back up here. The file proposal elaborates on the methodology, noting, for example, that these prices will be weighed such that Bitcoin prices from exchanges with a greater amount of trading volume in the prior hour are weighed more heavily than Bitcoin prices from exchanges with lesser amounts of volume. The exchange believes that the proposed rule change is designed to prevent fraudulent and manipulative acts and practices, and to protect investors and the public interest, the proposal says. In previous Bitcoin ETF projections, the SEC has highlighted concerns about market manipulation. So this is why I always tell you guys about there's a manipulation going on in the market. We also saw that, I think it was in South Korea, I think two executives of a cryptocurrency exchange got arrested because they were inflating the volume on their exchange, guys. So we're still very young in this, very early in this young market, and there is a lot of cleanup to be done. But if these guys are able to say, hey, we're only pulling data from certain exchanges and we're verifying it, we're looking at it from the past hour, we're using an index, so we're aggregating the data, this may be enough for the SEC to say, great. And what's important here, and I want to just bear with me, let me go through this. The NYSE Arca, previously known as Arca X, an abbreviation of Arpelago Exchange, is an exchange on which both stocks and options are traded. It is owned by who? Intercontinental Exchange, ICE. Here's right. I think many of us are familiar with ICE now. Why? Who do they own? What service was launched under them? Bakkt. So you got Intercontinental Exchange, which owns the New York Stock Exchange, Bakkt, and obviously this is like a division of the New York Stock Exchange here, the abbreviation, right? So they have the power, they have the framework, they have the point of contacts, they have the relationships and all of that. So this could be promising. But like I said at the beginning of the video, we may not get an approval, right? It just depends on what the SEC wants to do. Here's a quote here. Given the fungible nature of Bitcoin, the index provider believes that the potential impact on index values of individual exchanges experiencing outside attempts to manipulate either reported volume or reported prices is muted by the use of large number of exchange price and volume inputs. So very, very interesting. While the NYSE Arca has filed a proposal, the clock has not yet started for its approval or rejection. So we'll have to see how this plays out. Attorney Jake Chervinsky of law firm Cobry Kim, if you guys recall, I shared his tweets just in a few videos ago, told CoinDesk that the SEC's deadline for deciding an ETF proposal is triggered by publication in the Federal Register. That almost certainly won't happen until the government shutdown ends, he said in an email. Now, this was published yesterday before the government reopened temporarily. So let's see if this gets moved to the Federal Register. So this is something we want to keep an eye on. And once again, this is not some random company, right? This is the Intercontinental Exchange along with Bitwise. So Bitwise, they provide the cryptocurrency index and beta fund provider. And they are a beta fund provider. So in combination, so I think this probably has a good chance. But like I said, no one can predict the future. And we don't know what else is going on in the SEC. And we'll have to see. But the combination of these two parties, I think, increases their chances. Obviously, when you have the Intercontinental Exchange involved, right? I mean, it's big time. We're talking stock exchange owner here, right? So just a quick note, previous Bitcoin ETF proposals have been withdrawn or rejected, with the CBOE most recently pulling its joint effort with VanEck and SolidX earlier this week. VanEck CEO Jan VanEck cited the government shutdown as a reason for this, explaining the companies were having conversations with the SEC prior to this shutdown, but that these conversations had ceased. However, he said the companies would refile after the government reopens. Now that the government's reopened temporarily, will they refile now? I don't know. It may not make sense because we don't know what's going to happen on February 15th, right? Where will the U.S. government have another shutdown? I hope not. It will be bad, but it may not make sense for them to file, during this period. It might be more prudent and wise to wait to let all this settle and the government's officially open and there's no threat of a government shutdown. So, as mentioned, this guy here, the money manager, the CEO, Jan VanEck, so he was on CNBC, right? And he talked a bit about that and saying why they didn't. And some folks are saying it may look like 2020 So let's see. We don't know. It could be like, for example, if the Token Taxonomy Act gets passed as well in this year, or in Q2 or so, it could be the SEC approves a Bitcoin ETF, and it could be maybe not the VanEck. It could be this one that's backed by the Intercontinental Exchange, New York Stock Exchange, right? So it's battle for the Bitcoin ETFs, and Gabor Gorbax, I've been trying to get an interview with this guy, but he's been so busy, and obviously because of this whole Bitcoin ETF stuff that's going on, he works at VanEck. So he reiterated what Jan VanEck said, which is that they're withdrawing right now and it'll keep everyone updated. However, the Winklevoss twins are not going away quietly, and these guys have been making a lot of moves. They're very rich. They have a lot of Bitcoin, and they have been making acquisitions and building out services. As you know, they own the crypto exchange Gemini, and they have plans to get their ETF approval. If you recall, they got rejected previously back in, I think it was August 2018. It was them and 8 other ETFs that got rejected. But let me give you the details. The twins have outlined a plan to win over regulatory approval for Bitcoin exchange traded fund. The duo said that the quickest way to do so is by answering their call and requesting more market surveillance on the crypto marketplace. And here are some quotes. We started to do that with the Virtual Commodity Association SRO, and bringing Nasdaq's smartest technology to our marketplace. And those are the step in the right direction to get regulators comfortable with eventually approving an ETF-like product. So they're now saying, okay, we understand. We got to go with the establishment. They're bringing in Nasdaq's technology, just as Bitwise and like the NYSE and Arca are combining their efforts, because it seems like everyone's combining their effort. The CBOE VanEck and SolidX, because I don't think anyone can do it alone by themselves. But a smart move by the Winklevoss brothers here in trying to make this happen. Bring in the big guns, right? Let's see. They explain further. It also happens to be one of the financial... Well, let me back up. The brothers' company, Gemini, has recently launched an advertising campaign in New York City. I've showed you guys these ads in photos people have posted. The duo have invested in the campaign, and it's seen all around with plastered banners on subways and taxis across the city, and even have billboards. This is their first campaign, and since the company is based in New York, they started off by running the campaign in the city itself, the twins inform. They've explained further, it also happens to be one of the financial capitals of the world, and also has one of the preeminent Bitcoin, or rather virtual currency regulators, New York DFS. So it felt like a great starting point for the campaign. Let's see if there's anything else as far as... They didn't really give any other details, but the fact that why I wanted to call this out is they're not coming back with the same old ETF that they got rejected with. They're bringing in the big guns. They're bringing in Nasdaq technology, because you have to bring some sort of advancement to show that you're able to calculate the price of Bitcoin correctly, because there is manipulation. It's global. There's probably shady exchanges in other countries. So you have to have maybe some real very smart or great technology, use AI technology and so forth. So shout out to them for not giving up. And like I said, they got a lot of money, so they're not going to give up easily. And they have a lot of Bitcoin. So they have really the most to get out of this, because they have a lot of Bitcoin, guys. And as many of you know, they're the two guys who sued Mark Zuckerberg over Facebook because they claimed they came up with the idea, and many of you know the backstory. So we got NYSE Bitwise Bitcoin ETF. We have the VanEck SolidX CBOE Bitcoin ETF, and we have the Winklevoss Bitcoin ETF, guys. So it's battle of the Bitcoin ETFs here. And like I said, it almost seemed like the whole ETF thing had ended, but then we got this news about Bitwise and NYSE Arca, backed by the Intercontinental Exchange. So this is not a joke. This is not some random company trying to do a Bitcoin ETF. This is a major player who's backed, right? Who's behind back. So this is very interesting, and it sounds like the Winklevoss twins are now trying to pull some of that Nasdaq technology to resubmit their Bitcoin ETF. So this was just from this past week here. So let's see what happens. Like I said, the Bitcoin ETF wouldn't necessarily be for you and me, retail investors, for the big money. And I think if one was to get approved by the SEC, it would be one of those positive sentiments and lifts for the market. It may turn the market from bear to bull right away. I could certainly see that happening, or it may not, right? But obviously, just from my educated guess, I would say so, especially if it's from like the NYSE Intercontinental Exchange. That would be big. If the Winklevoss ETF gets approved, I could see it happening, but it doesn't have the same impact, right? Because they're not the establishment. They're not the big major financial players on Wall Street, right? These guys obviously have money and so forth, but it wouldn't be the same as the CBOE or the NYSE Arca. So I hope you guys get that, and I hope you understand what's going on with these ETFs and, you know, the withdrawals and the new players and who's doing what. But it's interesting, and remember, it's going to start with Bitcoin. And once they get the door open, right, they get their foot in the door with Bitcoin, it's going to go to Ethereum, it's going to go to XRP, it's going to go to others, right? They're going to go down the list. And that's why, you know, if Bitcoin gets it, it's going to be so bullish because it opens the gates now, like the floodgates. So, and more of the big money would be comfortable in, you know, some, I should say. I shouldn't say more. I say some would be more comfortable going this route, where instead of, you know, being able to buying it and having it physically owned, I would say, because some folks may not want to touch it or be completely associated, but directly, but indirectly via the ETFs. Hope you get that. So guys, what do you think about this? Think we might get an ETF approval this year, given the new player? I know the CBOE VanEck thing, withdrawal, but also the Winklevoss look like they want to resubmit again. Maybe if the Token Taxonomy Act gets passed, it might be very easy for the Bitcoin ETF to get approved. So some things in play here, guys. So let's see what happens. But I certainly think it could be a catalyst to change the market from bear to bull. What do you guys think? Leave your thoughts and comments below. Thumbs up if you like this video. Please share this video if you found it helpful. Thank you for your support, and I'll talk to you all later.